First of all, Mr. President, I want to put this into context somewhat. And I think it's important to put it into some historical context. We have a tendency to think that what we are and what we do and everybody that's functioning out here today has the same supports historically and has the same supports today to complete on what was referred to as a level playing field. But it's not exactly like that. And that's not the way the world exactly works. Clearly, there are those who are in a position to do better than others because they have a starting point that's above where others are. They have exposure to various kinds of resources that others do not have. There's all kinds of things that create strengths in one's ability to move forward fast or more effectively than others. But if you put this into a historical context, in fact, we can take one of these elements, let's call it race. Let's just call it race. And I want you to understand this is not the tack I would prefer to even take today, other than the fact that there are some that would deny that there is such a thing, that it doesn't matter, that all things are equal. And by God, here you go, just do your thing. You got the same thing, you got the same ability, nothing affected you. The past doesn't count. We have no responsibility whatsoever as a society. In fact, our future depends on every individual action. But it's more complex than that, and we know that. We know historically that's true. The only thing you have to do is not understand that, but understand that we didn't just move through this society historically. There were forces impacting on individuals, very intentional. They had very real results, and much of which manifests itself today. Now, anyone denies that is talking from a different frame of reference from what reality reports. Let me give you an example. Was there slavery in this country? If slavery was in this country, did those individuals have the same ability, capacity, framework, resources to do what those who enslaved them had? If your answer is yes, then that tells me that if you think they had the same capacity, same abilities to project the same outcomes, and you say yes, then that's another reality. That's an alternate reality. That's a reality that's been dismissed by those who raise or even address the subject matter. But let's go further than that. There was something called emancipation. Oh, that got everybody ready. Everybody was ready to go, rip-roaring. You're free, go do your thing. But we know that's not true because they came up with a concept called Reconstruction. They knew then that those individuals that were subjected to those realities of enslavement could not possibly step forward and take advantage of whatever there was before them at that point in time. There was no equal, there was no level playing field. Now, anyone says there was a level playing field, again, they're dealing with a different kind of reality. I'm not familiar with that. Now, I have to tell you, not only do we have that, but they even cut back Reconstruction purposefully as a reaction to all those dynamics that led to those of goodwill for good purposes or not that freed enslaved human beings. So we have that. We know that. It's a historical fact. I challenge anyone to challenge what I just said. You can't. Not in real sense. Then, of course, we had those that reacted to that. I mean, we have advantages out here, and we're not going to give this to these people who just were enslaved. And by the way, we built a whole cultural thing of advantage around that. I don't have to get into the details. You know what I'm talking about. And they started instituting structural frameworks to limit the capacity of these same individuals I'm talking about. Let's call it Jim Crow. let's call it Jim Crow laws that were enforced by governments. Is that real? Did that happen? Did that advance individuals? Did that create an equal or level playing field? No. Challenge it. Then, of course, it was reflected in the Times by just looking at a few of the legal rulings. All they had to do is look at the Dred Scott and Sanford and decision. I think that's the one where, maybe I had the wrong one, but there was at least a legal decision that said there is no right that a black person has, and I'm paraphrasing, that's to be respected. So I'm gonna go further. I'm gonna go quicker. We did run into Plessy versus Ferguson. They taught it equal, separate but equal, but we know what that was. It was separate but unequal. We know that. I'm not gonna go into that. I know my time's running. It instituted not only something that struggled up to a point, but what we call to the civil rights movement, which brings us to Dr. Martin Luther King, who I marched with. I didn't just look at TV, marched with him. And someone talks about the content of your character and all this. Oh, he said a whole lot more than that, ladies and gentlemen. When you invoke the name of Martin Luther King, you remember, he wasn't stepping out there to struggle, get arrested, ultimately get assassinated, fighting against all this unacceptable behavior by a culture that didn't want to let go of its privilege, because it's true. What I'm saying is, even today you hear the language says there's nothing systemic, there's nothing structural. Everything we do is systemic. Every time we do a policy, we're setting up some type of system, a framework, guidelines, context, and we enforce it. And guess what? What we don't do enhances or allows for those unofficial behaviors to take shape, which are manifest today. We all know it. Racism is wide and deep, and it works against human beings. There are opportunities. There is no level playing field, if you speak in a general sense, that impacts an individual's life. So what I'm saying here is that I hear all the lofty phrases. I know what this country is capable of. It's the greatest country in the world. There's no question. We have the greatest conceptual framework talking about democracy. And it's for all. And then we say, well, forget the past, because the past. But guess what? The past is what we are now. We didn't come out of a puff of air. We were developed, and we evolved, and we had strengths and weaknesses that grew out of those frameworks and behaviors, some of which still persist today. And yet, as we profess to lift everyone, we won't acknowledge that. We say, just do your thing. You'll catch up, because the field is level.